Lenois back with you for hour number 3 of the Green Mountain Mornings program on WKVT 100.3 FM and AM 1490, 16 minutes past the 8 o'clock hour on Friday, April the 7th. And on Fridays, the custom during the 8 o'clock hour on Fridays, we are joined on the phone by Randy Holhut, the deputy editor of your reader-supported award-winning news and views source for Windham County, The Commons, free on stands every Wednesday, online at commonsnews.org. Good morning to you, Randy.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, Joyce. Thanks so much for tuning in. And we're going to get some firsthand reporting here. And the first time some of this information will be put out there through the media about the public hearing last night in Vernon on the sale of the Vermont Yankee nuclear reactor from Entergy to North Star Group. This was a public hearing that was delayed due to snow back in February, but finally having it last night. And Randy, you were there taking pictures and taking in the scene. So tell us what you saw and heard.
Well, what I saw and heard looked like the old familiar faces from Yankee meetings past,
right?
On both sides. But there was a good-sized crowd at the elementary school in Vernon last night of people concerned about this, because really this is still very much uncharted territory, with the idea of having a private company buy a nuclear plant with the purpose of taking it apart and disposing of it, and claiming that it can do so under budget, still make money, and return the site to greenfield status. And the general tone of it was the anti-nuclear folks saying, "Yeah, that sounds good, but can you assure us that you'll be able to do this as you describe it?" And the formerly pro-VY forces supporting the project, because of course and it's everyone's best interest to have this thing cleaned up and properly and decommissioned. But I think at the end of the evening, the people walked away with the same ideas they had when they got there.
Yeah,
Lots of questions, not many answers.
There will obviously be a report about this in next week's edition of the Commons, but I do find that interesting. In this week's edition of the Commons, in the Voices section, Leslie Sullivan Sachs of the Safe and Green campaign, and the headline to her letter was, "I want to believe this." And certainly it sounds good what North Star is promising with regards to the decommissioning process. But as you said, they have never done this before. Nobody has ever done this before. So it really is incumbent on them to try and give some assurances to that group. Now, none of those groups, we were talking about Safe and Green or the folks down in Western Massachusetts, were technically interveners in this, correct? I mean, there's some groups that have intervener status, but none of these groups that have been long opposers of the nuclear reactor were in that official capacity.
They weren't there in the official capacity, like Deb Katz from the Safe and Green coalition. She was one of the people who testified last night. She was there as somebody testifying, and the Safe and Green people here also testifying as citizens rather than interveners, and people in favor, like Brad Ferlin from the Vermont Clean. I forget what group he's from.
There's so many.
And the Campaign for Vermont Prosperity also supporting it, and it was once again a typical VY hearing without, of course, the street theater that we've grown to know and love from these
right.
events. People were really focused on trying to get the information, and I'd say there were about 100 people there in the cafetorium of the Vernon Elementary School. And, aside from a few shouts from the audience, from the people you would normally expect to shout from the audience.
Yep.
We won't name names, but it was respectful but a tough questioning to the person from North Star there, Mr. State.
Scott State, yeah. And I mean, he's somebody who seems to have, obviously there's been some adversarial relationships between Entergy and the folks who have been concerned about the safety and the safe operation of the plant. Scott State and the folks at North Star had to know that they were coming into this kind of atmosphere, and he seems like he's struck him, he's been able to take a more cordial tone at the very least, or a more accepting tone of some of the skepticism.
Well, he did manage to hold up well under questioning. He was pushed hard, and one of the people pushing really the hardest on him was Senator Mark McDonald, who used to be on the Vermont or NDCAP.
Right, the panel. Right.
And basically his McDonald's thing was, who's going to be stuck? Is Vermont going to get stuck holding the bag if the cost of cleaning up the site is more than what you budgeted for?
Right. And he was able to give them some assurances on that, because that has been the question when you're talking about some of these costs that keep coming up. They keep saying, well, if we're going to eat those costs, if that's the case. I'm sure that's what he said again last night. Scott State being that's who's the he here. Yeah.
Well, they did say that, but there were times where you heard a lot of circular logic going on.
Okay.
And objectively, since admittedly, you hear the words Vermont Yankee and your brain kind of checks out because you know all the arguments and you know all the players and you know what they're going to say. But this night, you could tell that this was not just the same old battles being fought. This is something brand new. I mean, the first time a non-utility is decommissioning a nuclear power plant. The first major decommissioning for this company. I mean, they've done cute little nukes in college campuses and research areas, research laboratories taking them apart, but they've never taken apart a 650 megawatt reactor.
Right. Now, these hearings are ordered by the state. So what kind of role did the state play in this? Just basically observers and listeners, or did they have a more active role?
Well, there wasn't the full PSB board. Mr. Volz wasn't available to be there, so you only had two of the three members of the PSB there, Margaret Cheney and Sarah Marshall.
Could be. Right.
When you're a photographer, you don't have to take.
Yeah, you're not taking the notes. You're giving us the photographer's perspective on it, and I appreciate it. But two of the three members.
Yes, so Mike Farrar was there, and he'll have the story for everyone on that. And actually, the media turnout was pretty heavy for that too, for everyone, because this is going to be the first time for a lot of precedents are going to be set by this process. So I think there's a little extra pressure to make sure they get it right, because with all the nuclear reactors scheduled to be closing in the next decade or so, what happens in Vernon is going to be repeated in a lot of towns, so for good or ill.
Yeah.
And I think the pressure is on to make sure we do it right and set the standard for everyone else.
Yeah, this was hearing number 1 of 2, so there will be another one, and this was a good teaser for the report that will be out from Mike Farrar in next week's edition of The Commons, which is free on stands every Wednesday and online at commonsnews.org. We'll get to some of the stories from this week's edition of The Commons that's been on stands since Wednesday with Randy Holhut, its deputy editor, after the bottom of the hour news break. 41 degrees under overcast skies at 21 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Green Mountain Mornings continuing now. Your host, Chris Lenois, continuing my conversation with Randy Holhut, deputy editor of The Commons. And Randy, it was just a week ago when you and I got together at the press conference that Peter Welch was giving at the Brattleboro Senior Center, and the ground was covered in white snow at that time. What a difference a week makes, huh?
Yes, and even more so if the weather holds up on Monday, and that's supposed to be 70 in the 70s.
Right. Yes, indeed. As the weather nut predicted in your Commons paper, talking about these April showers, but bringing in some warmer air. But taking us back to last Friday and the coverage of the Commons on Peter Welch's visit to our community. First of all, kudos for him to coming to Brattleboro in that crappy weather. He's not in danger of losing his congressional seat if he doesn't give town halls. His pictures and being put on milk cartons like other congressional members in other districts here. He could have easily said, due to the weather, I don't want to come down here. Yet he did.
Well, being from Vermont, he's not exactly afraid of weather.
No.
And it really wasn't so bad if you stayed in the Connecticut Valley, because it's just when you went up in the hills, like, say, Dummerston, got snow. We ended up with about 8 inches or so of snow and ice and assorted other crap from the storm.
Wow.
But in Brattleboro, it was mostly rain with a little bit of snow and sleet.
Yeah, we weren't close to 8 inches down here in Brattleboro. It was heavy. It was heavy as all get out. I was worn out the next day from shoveling. But and it was early enough in the day that the congressman was here in the morning. You and I were at the Brattleboro Senior Solutions, where he was highlighting some of the cuts to the Meals on Wheels program. And then later on, you followed him over to the River Garden for his Congress in the community?
Well, actually, Wendy did.
Wendy did? Okay.
So we did a tag team on that. I wasn't sure whether Wendy was going to be there, but she was. So, I got the pictures from the first event, and she got the proceedings from the second event. And clearly, Peter was not very happy with the new administration and their policy priorities, and neither were the people who were in attendance at the River Garden, and certainly what we saw at senior meals. I mean, what kind of idiot would propose cutting funding for Meals on Wheels?
On the basis that it doesn't work, that there's no demonstrable, proof that this program works other than,
people not dying of hunger.
Right. People actually getting fed food that they can't get out of their house necessarily to get to. I know the metric for that is just really out of whack. But it sounds like, despite the weather, people came to the River Garden wanting to hear from their congressman, and I liked that the headline of the Commons story talked about how he was offering hope. He is still somewhat upbeat about a lot of the challenges that we face. Yeah,
because granted, the Republicans have an absolute majority in all the branches of government right now, and in the short term, they can cause an awful lot of damage and hurt an awful lot of people. But what can counter that is strong civic institutions and public involvement. And certainly, these first 3 months of the Trump administration, there has been an unprecedented amount of public involvement and outcry and engagement that they're going to get what they want, but it's not going to come easy. And they're going to lose from time to time, like how healthcare blew up in their face. Right. And we can't be distracted by a few dozen cruise missiles going over in the Middle East either when we're talking about some of these domestic issues that the congressman was focusing on. Definitely worth people's time to read that story in this week's edition of the Commons about Congressman Welch's visit and some of the specific issues some of the members of the community brought to him. Also worth reading the back page of the front section and a event that Rural Vermont put on in Putney, Taryn Heon covering this for the Commons here. Now, talk a little about what Rural Vermont came to Putney to do. Well, they're kind of, Rural Vermont has been an organization that's been a big backer of farmers in the state and agriculture, trying to fight against big ag and support farmers that are doing organics and locally sourced production. But now they're starting to think a little bit higher, go to a higher level, and try and what do they need to do next? And trying to building community might be the next step. Certainly, that's a buzzword in the age of Trump. That your only protection against a big government is people power. Is it fair to say that rural Vermont is somewhat at a crossroads when you're talking about big picture direction, and there's certainly other organizations doing similar work, if not the same work, definitely on parallel tracks as them? Are they kind of trying to find their niche now? No, not so much find a niche, but to find another, would kind of redouble their efforts in promoting local agriculture, because as has been said a lot, that Vermont looks the way it looks because of farming. Without farming, both the big dog in farming and dairy in Vermont, and all the many organic farms have been springing up all over the place, and all the local food producers and the whole locavore movement. That has to be supported, and given in the change in government in Washington, where there's going to be not much support for small-scale agriculture and human-scaled agriculture, it's going to be incumbent on Vermonters to defend their way of agriculture against a corporate structure that doesn't want it to exist.
Well, and it strikes me, and you and I have had this conversation many of time when they talked about focusing these groundswell events, as they called them, in the different parts of the state and focusing on remote areas in each of the corners of the state, thus coming down to Windham County and a place like Putney. There's a real opportunity here for Southern Vermont. You and I have talked about how strong our agricultural sector is, the work being done not only by larger groups like Commonwealth Dairy, but smaller groups here. We seem to have a leg up in this ag and this organic and the whole movement towards smaller farms and some of these specialty foods as well as supplementals. That really is something that we could leverage more support from an organization like Rural Vermont.
Well, making sure that official policy helps support rather than make it more difficult for small producers to exist, because given the worst case scenarios that can happen with disruptions in supplies, the supply chain. It's been said that most communities only have about 3 or 4 days supply of food on hand, and if you have some kind of catastrophe that disrupts those tractor trailers going to the supermarkets, there's going to be a lot of hungry people.
Yeah. Without a doubt. And speaking of opportunities, I want to shift back to the front page of the paper. And I had a chance to talk to Mike Fair on Tuesday about his story with Marlboro College vacating their downtown campus here and moving their graduate programs up on Potash Hill with the undergraduate. I wonder, you've been on this scene for a long time now. Is not having that visible presence in downtown Brattleboro, how much of an impact is that going to have on Marlboro College, do you think?
I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference in not having the campus in Brattleboro. I think they were uncomfortable being landlords and owning the building there on Vernon Street. I only had rented a fraction of that building themselves. I think they wanted more control and it make more sense to integrate the graduate school with the undergraduate school and have it all up on the hill in Marlboro. I don't think it's going to make a huge amount of difference not having that building and all the worries that come with that building in their lives in Brattleboro.
That was my sense as well, especially the way they've changed some of their programs away from a technology focus to more of the social justice focus and more integrated with some of the work being done by the undergrads. It didn't really seem to me that it was a recruitment draw anymore for the low residency students the way maybe they once envisioned it. I do think, however, having somebody buy that building is a big opportunity for Brattleboro.
Yes, it is, because keeping it on the tax rolls.
Yeah.
And not having another nonprofit buy it.
Yeah. And it sounded like, Mike obviously wasn't able to extract from President Quigley of Marlboro who it was, but it sounds like there is a chance that we could see some movement on that in the near future.
Well, Brattleboro is a fairly happening place right now.
Yeah. We got a lot of things going on for us, including, in another story that you had on the front page, a renovated Brooks Memorial Library. Now, we just did our call to action on civics there, and I didn't actually get to leave the meeting room to go down and look at the mezzanine level, but Star was just raving about the floors when she was in here on Monday.
Yes, well, I was happy. I went by your setup that day because we didn't have room to put the before pictures in there, but I was in there to shoot the before pictures of the main reading room all torn up as they were installing the carpet downstairs. And the finished product is stunning. It really looks great down there. And we had a Voices Live event on Monday with Olga Peters as the moderator, talking about opiates. And it was the first big event downstairs in the main room, and there were a lot of people there, and everyone was kind of, wow, this looks great. And Star was really stoked about how many people showed up and how it worked. And you're going to see a lot more events in that room, in that space. It works well, as you remember from your spouse's show last fall. It works great as a concert hall. It works great as a lecture hall. It works great as a place to just hang out and read.
Yeah, and I know Brattleboro Community Television was there documenting that Voices Live Forum, and I'm sure you'll have more coverage of that coming up in future editions of the Commons. You'll also have more spring sports coming up in future editions of the Commons as we turn the calendar to the spring sports season. But I liked your focus this week in the sports page on unified basketball in Leland and Gray. I mean, this is a program that really, it's great to see it getting out to more and more communities. And it looked like people, just from your photos that you had of it, that it was just really such an enriching experience for everybody who got involved with it.
It's an expanding program. There are now, a couple of dozen schools in the state that are offering this a chance to have a new spring sport and get new people involved in athletics and enjoy it and make connections.
I think Hinsdale has a unified program as well, if I'm not mistaken. So it is nice.
That's that side of the river.
Right. But I'm just trying to remember other schools, and I think I remember.
In New Hampshire, it's good. It's pretty big too.
That's great. Great stuff. And yes, in Townsend at the Leland and Gray School, not at the Bellows Falls School. But that's just, looking into the future there. Always good to talk to you each and every week, and looking forward into the future to next Friday. Randy, thanks so much for your time.
And by then, we might have sun in spring.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. All right, take care.
Thanks.
All right. Randy Holhut, Deputy Editor of your reader-supported, award-winning independent news and views source for Windham County, free on stands every Wednesday and online at commonsnews.org. We'll be back to wrap up this edition of the Green Mountain Mornings program after these messages.